Welcome into Coffee Break. I am not Rachel Vihill. I am Jake Shapiro filling in for Rachel, who is on a well-deserved vacation as she gets away from some of the stink here in Denver. D-Mac, Mace, you both were at the Broncos game last night. Yeah. Can you do a really sad harmonica, D-Mac? That's the season escaping from the Broncos as they fall to the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm going to start here, guys, with another loss. Just how disappointing was that loss? They come in as favorites. They hold another 10-point lead. We heard from D-Mac last night, so I'm going to start with you, Mace. What are your takeaways from this loss?
I mean, look, if you dive in, you can say, okay, there are some positives. I thought the offense had a little bit better flow with Clint Kubiak calling the plays. They had some momentum early, but I just keep coming back to this. I mean, losing teams find ways to lose games, and losing teams, when one thread gets pulled, the whole thing comes apart. And so you have Melvin Gordon fumbling, and that's the thread that all of a sudden things start going wrong on top of each other. And that's why I thought it was really interesting what Justin Simmons said kind of about referencing the culture last night. I mean, there is something deep in the Broncos DNA right now.
Oh,
did Mace freeze?
Yeah, Mace froze, D-Mac. It's not me or you.
All right, that was weird. We got a frozen Mace.
Yeah.
I'll pick it up because you didn't move and I didn't move. Oh, there he is.
No, we didn't move. There's something.
Well,
there's something.
I thought we were all gone.
But no, D-Mac, I'm with Mace, and I'll let you, because you were in that press conference. There's something in the Broncos DNA right now that it's a team of losers. Like, they make a lot of losing plays. Well, it is. They make a lot of losing plays game after game. It doesn't seem like they make the right plays.
Well, listen, there are some easy solutions here, and why they just don't accept the easy solutions befuddles me. Okay, easy solution number one: cut Melvin Gordon. Have a sense of accountability, and just that's that. Melvin Gordon has been just far too responsible for bad moments. It should have been 17-7, and then you get the ball to start the second half. It would have been perfect. Any score, and you had scored on every drive, theoretically, had you got a touchdown there. So what exactly is going to stop you? Let's just say it's a field goal. So you're now leading 20-7, theoretically. That game is virtually over. You did it. You did what you needed to do. So you got to cut Melvin Gordon, and you need to do that as soon as possible. They do have another running back, Marlon Mack, on the roster, Jake. That was a healthy scratch. Why is he on the team? Why did you add him? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. We're talking about goal line inside the 5-yard runs, Jake. Jacobs yesterday for the Raiders carried every single time for the Raiders. 24 carries. He had all of them. So you don't have to have running back by committee when you don't have that many runs, Jake. You just don't. So you cut Melvin Gordon, all right? That's number one. Number two, you just keep going down this Clint Kubiak path. All right, fine. Special teams is abhorrent. It is so bad on special teams. You can't trust Montreal Washington. That's it. The end. I know I got a lot of grief about Patrick Surtain, but that certainly would be a better decision than Montreal Washington. And most of the time, I would have Patrick Surtain do nothing. He would be fair catching the ball or letting the ball go. I just trust his judgment. And if you don't think that, because it's so crazy about him, okay, fine. Cortland Sutton. Give me somebody else who's some sort of vet. We did live in a time when Emmanuel Sanders, Eric Decker, Wes Welker, should I go on? Aqib Talib had that sort of responsibility. But we kill ourselves in terms of field position. And we're just waiting for the next bad shoe to drop when it comes to Montreal Washington. So I would move on from Montreal Washington. Having one-trick ponies as special teams guys, I don't like anyway. They're not all that effective. the best you can hope for is what, a 13-yard return? Cut Melvin Gordon, take away responsibilities for Montreal Washington, and essentially just those two moves would help you. But you've got a disaster here, guys. I mean, you're right. You've got a culture problem. You have a player problem. You have a coach problem. For Russell Wilson to not know that he has got to hit the dirt, try to run, or throw a complete pass is ridiculous for an 11-year guy. That's not something you need to tell him. And it probably was told to him because they had the 2-minute warning. It was a horrifically irresponsible decision by a player who should have clearly known better. Was that the ultimate difference? I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, it only took them 2 plays in overtime to get the W. They probably could have driven down the field quicker to get the game-tying field goal. So it might not have been the biggest difference in the world, but they keep making the same dumb mistakes over and over and over again. So again, the other thing is just to fire Hackett and just move on from him. I mean, if I'm Greg Penner, this is not a complicated decision. It should have already happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think like that decision there, like inside 2 minutes, it's one of those things where, as Zach Bly would say, 2 things can be true at the same time. It was a bad decision to go for a pass there. Should have just handed the ball to Latavius Murray, who's fumbled like once in his last 950 touches. Just tell Latavius, all right, just protect the ball. We get what we get. At minimum, we're going to at least drain 40, 45 seconds off the clock between now and when we have to punt. Because since 1994, according to Pro Football Reference, teams in the Broncos type of situation, up 1 to 3 points inside of 5 minutes, facing 3rd and 8 to 3rd and 12, those plays are converted less than 33% of the time. So you're basically saying like a 67% chance it's not going to work out. I'm going to take the 100% chance that I can drain the clock and call the run. So I don't like the call to begin with, but then beyond the call, Russell Wilson, you have to take the self-sack. Do the Peyton Manning self-sack there. Don't try to throw it 15 yards downfield. Just take the sack, drain the clock, and then punt. It's like, and this is the thing. It's like, it's not just one thing that's wrong. It's multiple things that are wrong. And then you start adding up all the multiple things that are going askew. And that's how you have a team that is 3-7. And you look at its wins. 2 of its wins are over Houston and Jacksonville, teams that, like the Broncos, really don't know how to win.
Yeah, listen, I'm not against putting the ball in the hands of a player who makes $50 million this year, okay? So I wasn't against the play call. It was 3rd and 10. It's unfortunate that it got to 3rd and 10, but it was 3rd and 10. So I'm not against the call. The call's fine. I mean, you could have run it better. You could have put him under center and made a play action and maybe like a boot roll, and either the play is there or the play is not there. If the play is not there, and it can be a one-read play if you wanted to really keep it simple, either you fool them or you don't. So you could run a simple play action, boot roll. Is it open? Good. Dink and dunk to him, right? Stay in bounds. I'm okay with that because if you get a first down there, you win the game. The game's over. If you just call a boring run play, you're going to work the clock, but you're going to punt. So you would like to hope you can take a small chance, guys, a small chance with a player you pay $50 million. Small chance. Fine call, horrible execution.
And to your point, guys, it's multiple things. We saw the win probability skyrocket in the Broncos' favor right before that play. It topped out at 87%. They had an 87% chance of winning that game then. Mace, you tweeted this out and wrote a whole article about it a week or 2 ago about how the Broncos have had positive win probabilities in all of these games that we're currently seeing on screen. So you now add this second Las Vegas game. So I want to ask you this. Obviously, the decision there was not the wise one. But how much do we want to discredit what we've been calling one of these great defenses because they have not been able to hold on to all of these, huge win probability chances for the Broncos?
Well, the defense, there's an issue going on here, and it's that while in the aggregate they're terrific, they seem to be susceptible to the explosive play. And we saw that against the Titans last week on the flea flicker. We saw the Raiders had 3 explosive plays after the 1 minute mark of regulation, the pass to Josh Jacobs, and then those passes in overtime to Moreau and Devontae Adams. So like this team seems to be particularly susceptible to the explosive play, even though it does a good job in the aggregate. The other thing also is you have to question what's going on in its 2-minute defense, right? Because against Tennessee, you're up 10-0, and they go prevent, and the Titans march down to their first points of the day. They come out in a 2-minute situation there against the Raiders yesterday, and the Raiders marched downfield. It could have easily had a touchdown. They settled for the field goal because the Broncos stiffened in goal to go. But it's a defense that it's a very good defense, but it's not kind of finishing when it matters most. And the thing is, fellas, that's what we saw in the Vic Fangio era, right? It was a very good defense for the most part, but it seemed like quite often when the chips were down, it didn't make the plays it needed to.
You know, that's a great point, Mace. And I wonder in football if we could figure it out, like batting average with runners and BARISP, batting average with runners in scoring position. Like when it matters most, how good is this defense? You know, and my guess is that it doesn't fare that well, actually. What are yards allowed in crunch time situations? And again, I'm sure there is some sort of analytic for that. I just don't know where it exists. But in overtime, end of first half, end of game, boy, doesn't it seem like this Fangio defense that they've been running for the past couple of years is susceptible to big plays and big yards when they had been preventing it all along. And, hey, guys, our generational player got beat twice, okay? Flat out. He was on Devontae Adams on the first touchdown pass with some help from Simmons. At least they were close to him. And then on the second one, and it did take blame for it. And Justin Simmons even defended Surtain in the locker room, which tells me it was really his fault in the overtime one. If Simmons wasn't coming loudly to Surtain's defense, I would say maybe it was some sort of mix-up. No, I mean, he just got faked out of his jock. I mean, that's all. I mean, maybe Simmons should have made a tackle at the 3 or 4 yard line. Perhaps, I guess, if you watch the play, Simmons kind of leaned to the left when he should have gone to the right when he should have gone to the left. I mean, oh well. I mean, that's a great example right there. I love that.
It's good. Yeah, it's good play design there by the Raiders, to their credit, because you get everything flowing in one direction. Then Devontae goes counter, and then once he makes that double move on Surtain, everyone's bitten on the flow of the play going to the left side from the Raiders' perspective. And then it becomes incumbent upon Pat Surtain. He's got to make sure he doesn't bite, and he did. And then the first touchdown earlier in the game, he's passing Adams off to Kareem Jackson. Kareem's got to be in better position to make that play.
Get it, but you got to stick with Devontae Adams, Mace. I mean, you're on him on his hip. You don't just say, "Oh, hey, good enough." I mean, you can see he's running into the end zone. I mean, all right, well, all right, whatever.
Let me ask you this before you go.
Here's the truth. Here's the truth about Patrick Surtain II. He's a really, really good player. He's likely a Pro Bowl player. The concept that he is some sort of, I don't even know what generational player means. You know, I mean, what is that? That's a cornerback once every 20 years, 25 years. I mean, what is that? And people love to throw that around left and right. He's a really good player that hopefully has great potential. But guys, look how easy it was to move Devontae Adams into the slot away from Surtain, who hangs out on the side. And it was simple. It was simple for the Raiders to avoid. And I'm not even putting that on Patrick Surtain or the Broncos defense. That's just life in the NFL. So teams are just going to do that. They're just going to move their best receiver into these slots. And that is going to be more difficult for Surtain to cover him, period.
Did we give Pat Surtain his flowers too early? Because, I mean, I was responsible for this. I even wrote that maybe he's gunning for a dark horse depoy year. Obviously, the Broncos would need to be better.
What are you doing, Jake? Why are you doing that to him?
Because it was a question. It was a question in the press conference last week, Mac.
I don't know what happy juice. I don't know what happy juice George Payton has fed all you guys, but calm down. The cornerback can only have so much of an impact, period. You want to see a disruptive player? Watch Max Crosby's game yesterday.
And this is what Davante Adams had to say right after he won the game for sorry, not Oakland, Las Vegas.
Let me read it. Oh, he's too young. He's not there yet. He's not there yet. That's what I'm talking about, boy.
He's not there yet. Mace, I mean, you've been talking about it. He's one of the best corners in the league. Did we see maybe Surtain get taken down a notch and taken down a peg from that upper echelon? And what's your take on that?
I mean, he's still in the upper echelon, but he had a bad day. I mean,
Yes.
and that happens from time to time. I would expect Surtain to be better from that for that.
It doesn't happen to. This is so stupid, but it doesn't happen to generational players. It's so absurd to say. It's such a ridiculous thing to put on a young player. It's dumb. It's like expecting a second-year quarterback to be qualified for the Hall of Fame. There is a growth process to all these guys, and putting unfair expectations is just that. It's dumb. He's a really good player, Mace, you're right. He had a bad day. Hopefully he learns from it. I doubt it'll be his last bad day. All sorts of players have bad days, except if you are a generational player. I mean, a generational player, you're not the best player that year, not the best at your position. You're one of, the top 2 or 3 ever? That's a generational player, and that's a ridiculous label to put on a really good young player.
And really, like at cornerback specifically, we know what generational looks like because we saw it with Champ Bailey. And Pat Surtain is very good. He is not at Champ Bailey's level at this time.
No, but people want to try to make themselves feel better that the fact that George Payton didn't take a quarterback when he should have for a really good player. But we see the relative value of a cornerback compared to a quarterback. We see it week in and week out. So this is not to rip on Patrick Surtain. I'm not mad at Patrick Surtain. The Raiders only scored 22 points. It wasn't the craziest thing. But Davante Adams had a day, boys. I mean, that dude had a day. And Jacobs had a great day running the ball, too.
Yeah. Davante Adams, now that's a guy that I feel very confident saying is generational in a Hall of Fame and a Hall of Famer.
Look what he's done.
Yeah, look what he's doing. You took him away from Aaron Rodgers. Davante's still putting up huge numbers in Vegas, right? He doesn't need Aaron Rodgers to be insanely productive. I mean, really.
No, and that's why a receiver like him is more valuable than a quarterback. It's hard to find guys like him. There's
more valuable than a quarterback or a corner?
Like in the whole league.
A corner, right? Not a QB. Because you thought you said quarterback there.
No, it's Davante Adams. It's hard to find guys like Davante Adams. There's probably 6 or 7 of them in the league. Now, that's the theory why you got Patrick Surtain is to stop that guy. And that guy is just better, okay? And they'll always be better when they have time to run. You can't just hold guys. You can't. They will run. And you need a total team defensive effort to get the best out of them. Davante Adams, we could probably name him. Who else do we like, guys? Hopkins, Jefferson maybe at this point, Tyreek Hill,
Cooper Kupp,
Travis Kelce as a tight end. These are the guys.
DMAC, I want to point this out real quick just as a drive-by. Obviously, PS2 had a bad day, but Nick Kosmider tweeted this out this morning. The Broncos had a terrible, terrible pressure rate yesterday. They were not affecting Derek Carr, who is basically immobile as a quarterback in 2022 gets in the pocket. I just thought the defense in general, it wasn't just a Pat Surtain thing. It was just everything on the defense didn't look that great. For the Raiders to look like that explosively in the fourth quarter and then overtime, a week after Derek Carr was on the podium crying, I thought that said a lot. And personally, it made me think, is Evero the correct choice to be an interim coach? Should Hackett be fired?
It depends what you want to. The answer there's a couple of answers there. I would say yes if you think you may want him for next year. If they don't fire Hackett today, I think you'd probably want to see what you can get out of Evero. Okay, but I think that happens probably more like Eric Studesville with Josh McDaniels in the final 4 games of the season, likely after you get mollywopped, to quote Orlando Franklin, by Kansas City in 3 weeks. You Battle Carolina is probably close one way or the other. You probably get smoked at Baltimore, and then you just get it hung on you at home by Kansas City. Likely that's the time that, the season's over. You may be 3-10 at that point, and frankly, you'd be insane to bring Hackett back. That's when probably you go with Evero. If I were to replace, first of all, I would have replaced Hackett already because I wouldn't have given up on the season. But that hasn't happened. And that's why I suggested Gary Kubiak to be the interim coach with Clint Kubiak calling plays. And I suggested making that change during the bye week. They didn't take my advice. So as time goes on, it probably is too late to even matter to have Gary Kubiak be the coach because you're not going to make the playoffs. So if you're not going to make the playoffs, there's no reason to have an interim coach like Gary Kubiak. You should have Evero. You should see how he and wins and losses don't matter. You need to see how he would handle the week, how the team responds. And, you'd probably lose Outen and you'd probably lose Butch Barry at the same time. And, yeah, I think that is the right thing to do probably in 3 weeks if Hackett doesn't get blown out today.
I think in the micro for Evero here, and kind of going back to the original thing on the pressure rate, I do wonder if by using Draymond Jones so often as a stand-up edge, I think you may be limiting his effectiveness a little bit. I mean, I understood last week when you didn't have Baron Browning, but yesterday you did have Baron Browning back. And and maybe you get Randy Gregory back in the next couple of weeks. So I think maybe the call to kind of get a little bit more pressure involves putting Draymond back on the inside because that's where he's most effective. He can work on the edge. He's just not as effective out there. But as for
I'm just laughing here because what did we expect when you traded away Bradley Chubb and you have ineffective Nick Bonito? Or not ineffective, but just,
he's young. He's literally learning how to set the edge against the run because he didn't do it at Oklahoma. And he had some flashes last week, but yesterday, I'll say this. No one wants to give Josh McDaniels credit around here, but I thought McDaniels actually had a pretty good game plan for countering what the Broncos brought.
Yeah. On top of the Evero stuff that we've just been talking about, I do want to ask you guys this question, which is, why does Nathaniel Hackett even have a job right now? Did you expect him to be fired at some point this morning? Or are you in the middle like DMAC where it's like, all right, you either fire him early, get the interim in, try to save your season, or at this point you just ride it out because you're not playing for the playoffs?
I thought when he changed play callers, it gave him 4 games, which would be yesterday, Carolina, Baltimore, Kansas City. I did. I thought that would be a fair sample size to see if this thing actually works. So I guess I'll stick to that, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised if he gets blown out at any moment. And he certainly, unfortunately for Nathaniel Hackett, because he's a nice guy, they've got to get somebody in to set a different tone with Russell Wilson. And that is exactly what happened when Gary Kubiak took over for John Fox. They needed a different tone. And the only way to do it was to actually move on from John Fox, who was actually incredibly successful. But they did have to go in a different way to win a championship.
Yeah, and I think if they move in a different direction, it's got to be a head coach who isn't going to try to be a friend. I mean, as Herb Brooks said, I'll be your coach, but I won't be your friend. So in other words, a coach who isn't going to go spend a few days in London during the downtime between OTAs and training camp with the quarterback. I think you're going to need some kind of separation. And frankly, a coach with the gravitas to tell Russell Wilson, no, he doesn't. And the coach doesn't have to be offensive, right? In fact, if they make a change, the thing that I do not care one iota about is if they're an offensive wizard, a great play caller, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I'm looking for somebody to bring the entire operation together and somebody who's got some credibility. Put it this way. I don't want them to bring in a coach and they have to use the phrase leader of men to kind of mask the fact that the resume is pretty thin. And I'll go back to the thing I said last year. If I owned a team, that team would never hire a first-time head coach. Yeah. Let the coach make the mistakes on someone else's dime. And look, most of the Super Bowls in the last quarter century have been won by retread coaches.
Did Russell Wilson look a lot better to either of you yesterday? The quarterback efficiency charts kind of lay out that he had a much better day than the ones he's been having. And if he did, how much did it have to do with Clint Kubiak calling the plays?
I thought he was much better. And real quickly, yeah, I thought he was much better. I thought there was better flow to what they were doing for the most part. I thought he was getting the ball. He was getting the ball out quicker. He was making better decisions. It was definitely geared more toward what Russ does best. So just because it only resulted in 16 points, there were enough things that you can kind of lean on positively and build from that. And yeah, I'm glad you put that up there. There are a lot of metrics that showed Russell Wilson was better, including the efficiency there. Did you guys? The funny thing is, ESPN QBR had Russell Wilson at 29.2. So
wow.
I'm not quite sure what went into that because we can't kind of see their work. It's interesting to me. I look at Russell Wilson yesterday and I thought he did well, and he's a couple of drops away from having a terrific game. I mean, Kendall Hinton lets the ball go through his hands on that free play off the offside.
That's an interesting QBR thing. I know his QBR, his quarterback rating, his traditional quarterback rating was closer to like 100, like 99.8 or something like that.
Passer rating, yep.
Yeah, passer rating. Sorry, thank you. That's interesting. His QBR was so low compared to what his passer rating was. I thought he had a very solid game. I thought he had a game like a lot of mid-level quarterbacks are capable of having. It wasn't a superstar game. A superstar game means that you can actually create something from nothing. Russ can't do that. He can't run away from things. He can't get something with his legs. He doesn't have an unbelievable arm to fit a ball in a place that maybe it shouldn't go. He's not a gargantuan risk. Like, there's nothing extraordinarily special about Russ, but he had probably his most efficient game just managing things. But again, you've got to balance something, when it matters most. It means more to get that base hit in the 8th inning than in the 2nd inning. And when the game is absolutely on the line, you just can't make a terrible decision. You can't. You've got to. That's why you're getting paid. Those are the intangibles. So the degree that mistake is greatly magnified under the situation in which it happens. And so he loses big time points because of that on an otherwise pretty solid day.
So QBR does factor into account the opponent. So I'm assuming that probably contributed to being so low since the Raiders have been pretty lousy. I want to ask you guys this too. The pick going back to Seattle right now would be, I think, the 5th overall pick in the draft. And there's about a 50% chance it ends up being a top 5 pick. There's actually a higher chance that it ends up being the number 1 overall pick in the draft and the Broncos making the playoffs. When we look back at this trade in 10, 15, 20 years, how much will what that pick ends up being factor into, was this trade a total disaster? So let's say the Broncos gave up the number 1 pick in next year's draft for Russell Wilson, i.e. that, or the Broncos only gave up the 5th pick for Russell Wilson. Does that kind of factor into the account for either of you guys?
Yeah, I mean, Pro Football Focus was measuring efficiency ratings. I think it was Pro Football Focus. And the Broncos are 31 out of 32 teams in the NFL, and they speculated that the Russell Wilson trade may go down in NFL history as the worst one of all time, based on, which is hard to imagine topping the Herschel Walker Cowboys-Vikings trade that ultimately resulted in 3 Super Bowl championships for the Cowboys. But they're putting this one into the argument right now. Listen, you don't do a deal like you did for Russell Wilson, guys, to develop, okay? You don't. That is supposed to be a final piece of the puzzle. The whole argument about Surtain better than Fields was the fact that you would put a quarterback with a great player. You did that. And I mean, I have a hard time even accepting that, because I think that is incredibly risky and flawed logic. But I mean, I guess, okay, let's see. And because you didn't get that, and now we're trying to be sold that this is some sort of developmental year, I call BS on that. And they've had a lot of injuries, sure. But when is the moment that Russell Wilson is doing something extraordinary to get a win for this team? If you're that special, you would do something extraordinary. at some point. I mean, we are losing so many one-score games. You would think there would be a moment of brilliance.
I mean, or it's possible. I mean, I don't think it's likely, but it's possible that maybe Russell Wilson is all that's separating this team from being 0-9. I mean, because he led game-winning drives in the fourth quarter against Jacksonville, against Houston, against San Francisco, and against in all of those drives, there was at least one high-level Russell Wilson moment in those drives. I mean, but again, the
Dude,
success.
look what you're talking about, Mace.
I know.
Houston? Did you really just say Houston?
Yeah. Houston and Jacksonville teams that don't know how to win. They're in the same.
Wow.
They're in the same boat as the Broncos. Basically, they're losing franchises. They're losing cultures. But just to go back to the thing about the trade. Look, how we view this trade depends entirely on whether Russell Wilson can get things figured out. If this year ends up being the bad year and he ends up bouncing back and doing pretty well and the Broncos have a lot of success, then you're not thinking of this in the same way. And unless the Seahawks do draft like a Hall of Famer with that number 5 overall pick. So, I mean, that matters, but it matters less than what Wilson himself does and what the Broncos do to try to figure things out and maximize him. The only way out of this for the Broncos is getting Wilson back to, if not elite level, at least solid starter, kind of between quarterback 12 and quarterback 16 level. Because right now, across the board, he is a bottom third starter in the season.
Then trade the total bust then. Because you don't give up that value and that cash for 12 to 15. And we're talking about that as the top of the ceiling. No, if that's it, then this is just an absolute horrific deal.
You can win with that, though. You can be a winning operation with a quarterback that's like QB 12 to QB 15 or 16 if the other stuff's there.
You can always make a deal in the offseason to get that guy. You can try at least. I mean, those guys are the guys who are 20, 21 that you prop up. We're talking about the Trevor Simeons of the world, dude. I think.
Oh no, Simeon's down. He's a level below that. I'm talking.
Are you talking about like Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, like Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill. I'm talking about a quarterback like that.
But when you have a guy like that, I know you can win with QB 12 to 15. But can you win with QB 12 to 15 in a salary cap league when you're paying the guy $250 million?
That's a fair question. But the thing is, I'm in my mind, I'm saying like, all right, can he get back to elite level? It looks less and less likely that he can get back to kind of that elite tier. So what can you do to get value out of him?
Talking about, this is why this approach is the riskiest strategy you can use. I know when George Payton drafted Patrick Surtain, he looked around the room because, he's got to get approval from everybody. God forbid he just make up his own mind on something. Is this safe? Is this safe? Is this safe? Hey, Dad, is it safe? Hey, everybody, is this safe? Safe, safe, safe. What he was actually doing was doing the most risky thing of all time. So this is why George Payton should just be moved on. He has no concept of relative value, and he has no courage of that conviction. So he doesn't have the right philosophy, and he doesn't know how to execute it. And in a move of complete desperation, because for 2 years in a row they tried to get Aaron Rodgers, which again was a cockamamie, like ridiculous, risky move that failed 2 years in a row. You pose this, we were always going after Russell Wilson. I mean, give me a break, guys. I mean, can anybody buy that deal? And then we find out the Seahawks are desperate to get rid of Russell Wilson. And we're like, George Payton didn't give away Patrick Surtain. Oh, wow, what a genius. What a bold move. We got fleeced. The Seahawks have been trying to give away Russell since 2017. Can you imagine the tequila shots that were going around the Seahawks headquarters when that deal actually went down and what they got in return? It's the fleecing of all time, and it's because George Payton lacked the courage to do the right thing, the most affordable thing, and the thing that the Broncos screwed up the most in 2018. He just sat there like a dolt, not studying the history of the team, and made the same exact mistake. he should be gone before Hackett should be gone.
Well, strong words from D-Mac. I'm going to let Mace go because I know you got a U.S. men's national team game to watch, but catch Mace on Orange and Blue later today at 3:30. Mace,
by the way, real quick. My favorite part of Mace's stand-up was when he wished everybody happy Thanksgiving in the most depressing way possible at the end of his video stand-up online. I thought that was happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
and have a happy Thanksgiving.
I wish I hadn't lost my connection there, because the one thing I wanted to push back on, D-Mac.
Hey, you're beyond reproach, D-Mac. He has nothing to push back on.
That is a riot. That is so funny, Jake. Sorry, Mace.
We'll hear from Mace on Orange and Blue today at 3:30 today. We'll see what he has to
The
say.
one thing is, no, I'm fine. I'm actually okay.
It's like night at the museum when sun up hits. I know Mace on the back end. You can go watch the game, buddy. We're all good. I want to jump towards this, D-Mac. We saw a crazy thing happen in the Nuggets game. I'm sitting there texting Mace and Rachel and Will, our whole digital team, trying to figure out our plan after the Broncos game. And I'm like, hey guys, you won't believe what just happened in this Nuggets game. I know nobody's watching this, but maybe we should be paying attention to this. I'm going to play the clip and then I'll tell you what happens afterwards.
Okay, great.
So in 24 years of this, I've never seen what's about to happen. By rule, when a shot goes in with zeros on the clock at the expiration of any quarter, it has to be reviewed. And so when they reviewed Luka's three that had everybody up and hollering, they found out that he stepped out of bounds with 2 seconds remaining in the second quarter. And that was a couple of minutes after the teams had already gone back to the locker room. So what's going to happen here is, as you see that heel out of bounds, they've come out of the locker room. They're going to play 2 seconds, guys. And then we'll have the third quarter.
Goofy stuff that goes on sometimes, you know?
Got to get a stop here, so it's a 4-point lead for the Mavs.
This isn't the 5 that was what?
No, you have to have the 5. Oh my gosh!
What is happening?
Vlatko Čančar hits it. I mean, you talk about something that just changes the ebb and flow of the game. Čančar from half court in one of the all-time weirdest situations we've ever seen. And it's off in time. It's going to count.
I think he traveled. Can they review that? This is very weird.
6-point swing in the middle of a Simon Says game, and the Nuggets end up winning by 1 point. D-Mac, you go to Nuggets practice all the time. Vlatko practices half-court shots every day. For this
every
situation.
Day, they do 2 things. He just practices them on his own, but also they do like knockout, you know, and they do half-court shots. The whole team does. So technically, the whole team does practice it. They generally practice it in a fun game sort of way, but it is practice. But Čančar on his own actually, you know, according to Mike Singer and what they've been told, puts up 50 shots a day in practice from half court. Don't forget, for these guys, okay, it's not you and I heaving up half court shots for an Oldsmobile at the college. These guys are 7 feet tall. You know, Čančar is close to 7 feet tall. Legitimately, Jake, for him, that's a shot. That's a legitimate just shot, okay? So he's not heaving it up. That's not by luck. That is practice. Now, the odds of it going in are, you know, tiny, obviously. But that, talk about a great preparation moment, coaching moment. And here's a fun one. It wasn't the same 5 guys on the court. They took off Devon Reed and they took off Christian Brown. And they put in Michael Porter Jr. and Vlatko Čančar for that moment. And I that was interesting. I didn't know you could make a sub in that moment, but they did. They made 2. They put in 2 point shooters.
Because he went out of bounds. So it was a whistle. So it's a
timeout. I mean, you can do whatever.
Right. It just so happened that the whistle in between when they ended play and started play was 17 minutes long with a game of Simon Says in the middle, which is why it was so weird. And think about this, D-Mac. What makes the Vlatko preparation for a half-court shot even stranger is what are the chances Vlatko's going to be on the floor in the last 30 seconds of a game with no timeouts where you can't advance the ball and chuck up a shot? The chances are low. He's the 15th man on the Nuggets roster. So the only situation that Vlatko would be on the floor for is being subbed in when there's 1 second left on a sideline inbounds from half court where he could chuck it up. And legitimately, I mean, to prepare for this very odd situation that's never come up, according to this Mavs announcer who's seen more basketball than me, is crazy. Beyond that, the Nuggets split in Dallas against a very good Dallas team with Luka Doncic, who, if we were talking about this in May and the Nuggets were playing the Mavs, a split in Dallas with Nikola Jokic, Aaron Gordon, and Jamal Murray would be a good split. They did it without any of those guys.
Yeah, it's a huge makeup game. Like, you could say losing a 10-point lead to the Knicks at home with a team, the Knicks, that haven't won in your building since 2006 was a really bad loss, which it was. That was an unbelievable win. I mean, that was a crazy win. And they had the same roster that 2 nights previous lost by 28 points. The point spread went up in that game, Jake. It was 9 points on Friday. It was 10.5 on Sunday. That shot was really, first of all, I think it's 7 points because it was 56-52 when Luka hit the three-pointer. So that would have made it 59-52. Instead, it's 56-52. He hits the three. So it would have been 52-59 if I'm not mistaken. And because you hit the three, you took what was a 7-point spread down to a 1-point spread. The Nuggets won the game, Jake, by 1 point. They won the game, and they were trailing with under 2 minutes to go. And Michael, let's not snooze on the fact Michael Porter Jr. had done nothing the whole game. He goes in, he hits his first 3-pointer to get the game-winning basket. I mean, wow. And
in the face of Luka Doncic.
What's that?
In the face of Luka Doncic. Like,
right, and then you stop Luka on the net. They had 6 seconds. They actually had quite a bit of time to get off. He didn't have to take that big 3-pointer. He could have driven to the basket and picked up a foul. But he is deadly. These guys are such good shooters, Jake. That 3-point line these days, that's a suggestion. Okay, that's not like we got to creep up to it. Those guys, Bones told us he doesn't even care about the line. He doesn't look at the line. So for these guys to be, hitting shots from way outside, Jake, it's not that crazy. So and Luka just barely missed his 3-pointer to win the game. No, that was about as high level of a win as you can get on the road or period in the season. And they love Konchar. Let me give you another little story. After a poor shooting night, which he has often these days, it was Konchar who was consoling and talking to Michael Porter Jr. in the locker room afterwards. Konchar, for the limited amount of time he plays for the Nuggets, is a star in Slovenia. I mean, if you watch Eurohoops this summer, he's a starter, dude, and he's a really good 3-point shooter, and he's very close with a lot of the European guys, especially Luka, who he's teammates with. So that's how deep the Nuggets are. But still, as deep as you are, to win a game without your 3 best players, that is wild. I mean, that is crazy.
Yeah, if I had told you a Slovenian had hit a buzzer beater on Nuggets Mavs to win the game, I think you would have chose Luka, not Vlatko. But yeah, Vlatko's really the right-hand man for Nikola Jokic during the season too. And what's really cool about Vlatko is he's the 15th man, but he can play point guard, he can play shooting guard, he can play center, he can play power forward.
Sure.
He plays any position that the Nuggets need him to. He's a really valuable player. So huge win for the Nuggets. We'll be talking about that on the drive, me and DMAC today at 3:45. You can check out DMAC's show from 2 to 6 every day, of course. Before we get out of here, really funny tweet came out during Sunday Night Football last night. The Chiefs almost blew the game to the Chargers, then come back, and of course Patrick Mahomes happens. But Mecole Hardman is hurt right now. He was watching the game on his couch, and he was no longer able to watch the game. So I asked you, DMAC, how close have you ever been to this happening to you, and what was the sporting event?
Oh my God, that I would have thrown something at my TV. All right, So I'm not at the game. I'm watching it on TV, and it's so devastatingly disappointed. Whew. Golly, Jake. Oh man, you got me on that. I gotta think about that one. Let me go to you first, and then maybe I can get back to it.
To keep it on Nuggets, Game 1, 2009 Western Conference Final, Anthony Carter inbounds. That might have been my break the TV moment. That was about as close as I've ever come.
I think it was when Carrie Underwood beat Bo Bice in American Idol. I mean, we were really a Bo Bice family. I mean, she definitely deserved it. She was way better than Bo Bice. But that was, I don't know. Jake, that's a hard question for me to answer because I've been very, very lucky to actually be at most games rather than, be watching them on TV. It wouldn't be anything with the professional teams here in town. I just wouldn't really feel like that. Well, I mean, boy, we're going back, okay? When you're so emotionally tied into something, okay, that you want to break something if it goes sideways. That's what you're asking.
Yep.
I would go back to the World Series when the ball went under Buckner's legs. I was in high school, and I was watching with about 7 or 8 people, and I mean, it was like that. Although you just couldn't believe it was happening. So I guess that's the moment. You got to go back a ways for me, I guess. I just don't get that emotionally invested in games, Jake. I mean, it might seem like it, but I expect the worst. I'm a cynic. I expect the worst, and I'm surprised by the best. So if something bad happens, I'm like, well, yeah, of course.
Well, the Best Buy in Boulder, I think, is doing well off the Colorado Buffaloes. I'll put it that way.
But wait, hold on. Again, you'd have to be disappointed by something and surprised by something, Jake.
When you're 30-point underdogs and you lose by 50, it's still a disappointment.
Yeah, but like at what point do you throw something that's the TV when you're down by 30, 37, 44? Like at what point do you hurl something at the TV?
Right. I don't know. Maybe you just turn it off at that point. But I think about it. Wow, DMAC, we've got breaking news. I'm going to hold you up here. Ian Rappaport reporting the Broncos have made a move following Sunday's loss as Denver has waived veteran running back Melvin Gordon. So I'm going to hold you up just for 2 minutes. Give me your thoughts on finally getting rid of Melvin after a really key fumble late in the first half where the Broncos could have scored a touchdown. Then the field goal gets blocked and the Broncos get no points out of a situation they could have scored 2 touchdowns in.
George Paton should have known better. The problems with Melvin Gordon for 2 years were so apparent. There was really no need to bring him back. George Paton did that. George Paton also sat there and didn't deal Melvin Gordon when he should have, which would have been like a month ago. Okay, fine. I'm fine with the move, Jake, because it's beyond obvious. But because George Paton was so hesitant and ineffective, it again has cost the Broncos. This is on George Paton. You're Nathaniel Hackett. You got to play the players that are on your team. You picked up Marlon Mack. Why? I don't know. Why don't you play him? Why didn't you cut him a couple weeks ago when you could have, when you picked up Marlon Mack? Why don't you go to Latavius Murray, who you picked up more often? George Paton this is a complete, utter failure by George Paton. Hey, Melvin Gordon just does what Melvin Gordon does. Fumble. He's led the league in fumbles, Jake. I mean, a cow is a cow. It's going to move. So we need to move on from Melvin Gordon a long time ago. So I don't give the Broncos any credit for it. So it's after the game. It's long after the game. And Justin Simmons is being interviewed in the doorway for whatever reason. I go into the locker room after doing this stuff with Rachel after the game, which goes for more than a half hour. And there's Melvin Gordon sitting at his locker, staring, fully dressed, could leave. Most of the players were gone. He is just staring into his locker. I was amazed Rod Mackey actually went up and even talked to him. And I would not have blamed Melvin Gordon for not doing an interview. He did agree to it and then was asked some really tough questions. He knew that it was his fault and he was to blame for it, even though it technically didn't cost the Broncos points right there, but it kind of did. That was 3rd and 1, Jake. It's an easy first down. Max Crosby, another superhuman play by him. But if you watch Moreau for the Raiders, when he caught that pass in overtime, did you see what he did? Did you see him cover the ball? That's all you got to do, Jake. You only need one arm. You put 2 arms around the ball and you fall forward. That's all you need to do. And Melvin Gordon, for whatever reason, could never figure that out. It's a overdue move. I don't have anything bad to say about Melvin Gordon. My interactions with him for the past 3 years have always been pretty good. I thought he was professional last night to talk about things. And this move, okay, great, I guess, but overdue. And another sign from George Payton, like, why did you wait so long? What were you waiting for? So, okay, cool. I guess hardly a game changer, though. Not a game changer, just a move that needed to be made. George Payton should get zero credit for making this move.
Between Peyton making the move to finally cut Melvin and Nathaniel Hackett finally making the move to get rid of the play calling duties before this game, an interesting week of moves for the Broncos. We'll think on it. You're going to have more takes on it on the drive, I know, with Derek Wolf. We're going to come back, round back up, coffee break, 10:30 a.m. tomorrow morning.
By the way, Jake, real quick, this does indicate Nathaniel Hackett's fine.
You're right. There's a scapegoat. So 10:30 a.m. tomorrow, we'll have Stoke and Zach. D-Mac will be back on. We've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about and some stuff you're not going to want to miss. We'll see you then.